Good morning, everyone. I have Jessi Shuraleff. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Got it. When you have names that
I went from the easiest maiden name of Olson to Shuraleff, which is of Russian descent, and I probably should have just kept my maiden name.
I say that all the time with mine, with Chickerel. I had Shapiro. It was easy. And then,
Exactly.
you marry these wonderful men and, and you get the wonderful man with the crazy hard name, but it's all
Yes.
good. So I was telling you offline that yesterday I interviewed someone who was like, in Florida. So at least you're bundled up and you've got snow too, so we can suffer together in this frigid cold weather. It's crazy.
Yes, we
But I'm
can.
so glad that you're spending time with me because we're going to talk about This Is My Truth podcast. I'm assuming it's on I'd like to say wherever you find your podcasts.
That's exactly it. It's available on all major podcast platforms.
So who is Jessi? Tell me about yourself.
I love that question. Thank you for asking. So, Jessi is someone who it's weird to talk about myself in the third person.
No.
I like to say that I am on this quest to rediscover who I am. And why that's so important is I have lived my life by labels for so long. I spent the last 13 and a half years at Google. So I was a Googler. Then I was a wife. Then I was someone who struggled with infertility. And eventually, and thankfully, I became a mom. And in all of that, those journeys, those paths of my life, I lost who I was. And it wasn't until one morning at 6:03 in the morning, I was brushing my teeth. I'll never forget this. I have like my electric toothbrush in one hand, and my husband just happens to look over at me and ask me very simply, "Are you happy?" And for some reason that morning, the truth just blurted out of me, which was no.
Did you
And
have, at that point, had you had your kids?
yep, I had had my kids. At that point, our children were almost one and almost three. And so it was just this perpetual journey of, putting everyone before myself. And it swallowed me. It swallowed who I was. And so, that moment of just blurting out truth, like for the first time, admitting to myself and then out loud that I wasn't happy, sent me on this path of rediscovering who I was and who I ultimately want to be. And in that journey, I had to deal with a lot of stuff that I hadn't dealt with. One of those being my journey to motherhood. And, we went through quite the journey. It was lots of ups and downs. I like to say it was a roller coaster. And I just shoved all of that down. I never dealt with it. And it was in going through that process, actually unpacking that and doing a lot of healing, where I started to share my story. And I shared it, with one close friend, and then maybe it was two close friends. And eventually I found myself on a stage in front of 60 plus women who I did not know, sharing my story. And it was terrifying, but it was also empowering. And it was my aha moment where so many people came up to me afterwards and said, "Me too." And it
Yeah.
wasn't as if they had also gone through an infertility journey or that they had the exact same stories. Like all of our journeys are uniquely our own, but there were pieces of my story that they could resonate with.
Mhm.
And so that's where, my recognition and my mission is to create community and connection through sharing stories, because I have seen firsthand what it can do, for myself, but then also for others.
I think there's so much power in what you just said that, and we know this, we know that when we share and that we talk and we communicate, and yet we still have to be reminded to do it. We need to go listen to the person standing on the stage. We need to be the person standing on the stage, but yet we need to be the person who reads the book of the person who stood on the stage, all those things. But I so appreciate that you were more than ever brave enough because, and I hope others have said that to you, in that um, you have to be brave to open yourself up. And so I think I say this in that that's really hard, even when you share with your one close personal friend. I think, not to put down men, but men have a hard time with that. I think we all have to work on our own husbands in that regard sometimes but so I commend your husband a lot for seeing something at that moment too. I mean, that's remarkable. What a great partner,
Yeah, my
because
yeah,
he saw something.
he saw something. He definitely, one of the reasons why I think men have a hard time with this is, not to get into like gender roles, but just
No.
culturally, like
Mm-hmm.
that's not necessarily quote unquote masculine. And, I'm very fortunate to be married to someone who sort of bucks those trends.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I actually probably have more of the quote unquote masculine way of dealing with emotions, and he has more quote unquote feminine, but it works for us. We're able to balance each other out.
Well, I love that. So I really commend that. And so, from sharing your story, what did the path take you then to? I mean, what came next? Were you working for Google at that time, or had you?
Yes, I was working for Google at the time, and at that moment, at the moment where like no blurted out of my mouth, I had a choice. I could, because me saying that scared him, and it for sure scared me. And so I could have easily just like backtracked and be like, oh no, 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 like I'm kidding, like I'm fine. Or I could have taken the brave or courageous path to me, which was saying like, no, that's actually how I'm feeling, and like I need help. And so I got help, and I started working with a therapist again. I found a coach. I found a community of like-minded women, and in that I realized that much of my career, and then ultimately what I was passionate about, because when I launched my podcast, it'll actually be a year. I was my daughter's fourth birthday, and her birthday's March 31st, so it's almost a year. And the whole premise, the platform, again, is to create that space for people to share their personal stories, conversations that people don't normally talk about. And I was like, is anyone going to talk to me? Like I had this fear, right, of
Right.
who's gonna share their story. And it was so eye-opening to me how many people were willing to share their story. People that had never shared stories before were able and willing to come on and share their story for the first time. And it was just such a humbling
Mm-hmm.
experience to be able to be with and walk alongside that person as they were going through that journey for themselves. Because for me, it was just so empowering. And, for anyone watching or listening, what we're talking about is scary. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it,
Right.
right? Like, and I always say that when you're sharing your story, you don't have to share it with, on a TEDx stage. So you start with sharing it with yourself. And so for me, what that looked like was I created a framework where writing is like
Mm.
how
So
my
like
brain,
like a
yeah,
journal.
journaling.
Okay.
And so writing is helpful for me to like, reflect and be able to comprehend things. And so I created a framework where I would take moments, and I define moments as like those fragments or those memories in your life that like you just can't get out of your head. It could be like something that happened 2 minutes ago, or it could be something that happened 25 plus years ago, but for some reason, right, like you can't get
It's
it
there.
out of your head. It just
Yeah.
pops up every now and then. And so
Yeah.
I have a running list of moments, and once a week I write about one of them, and as part of my morning routine. And it was through this framework that people started asking me, like, what does your path look like? How do you do this?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to host content workshops around sharing my framework and sharing it, because to me, it was such a healing process. It
Mm-hmm.
was so vital to my healing journey. Being able to take the power back of those moments. I say that I lost my voice. And now that I've refound it, like never again, I will never again allow someone else to own my story. I will be the one in the driver's seat, owning that story for myself.
Well, what I find when I'm hearing this, I say I'm so much older than you, and what therapy looked like, from the start was you go in an office, you sit down, you share, and the therapist, shakes their head kind of thing. And the truth of the matter is, while that may work, it 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 may not anymore. And to grow, people need different things. And what you're really talking about is um, different forms of therapy and digging deep into yourself. And you just provided such a great tip of grab a journal. you know you don't have to stand on a stage, you don't have to share even with a friend, but be honest with yourself. Nobody else is going to see it. It's funny, when I was a kid, I used to have a diary. We all, little girls had diaries, and
Yeah.
teenagers had diaries, and somewhere along the line, sometimes we stopped doing that. And it I still have my diaries. They're sort of hidden away in the basement here, my house, because I could never get rid of them. And they're so fun to actually read now. You think, oh my God, what was I thinking? But so there's something fun about reading them too, going back. But it is really important to sort of get that out. And sometimes an hour at a therapist isn't quite enough. And I love the journey of journaling. And I've talked to other people about this, and I think you probably would agree that sometimes people think, oh, I don't have time for that, or how much, I think you would agree that it's not the, length of that you do it. It's write a couple sentences if that's what it takes.
That's exactly it. And I'll be the first to admit, when I first started doing this, I had a ton of resistance. I was like, I don't want to write, right? And so I would literally set a timer for 3 minutes and be like, okay, write about a moment for 3 minutes. And then that 3 minutes became 5 minutes, and that 5 minutes
Right.
became time, right? But there was a hump that I had to get over,
Sure.
in terms
Yeah.
of getting comfortable with doing it. And I was very similar. I had so many diaries growing up. And and I sort of view the podcast now as like a verbal diary. Like I'm so excited
Right.
for the girls to be able to listen. They'll either be like very embarrassed or like think I'm the
Oh,
coolest.
I say that all the time. Like, here, my three kids are home. They could be watching right now. I know they're not. Like, my daughter used to call me every day at 10 o'clock. I'm like, do you not realize I'm on live? Like, I tell you, she's like, I thought it was at 11. I'm like, no, it's at 10. And like, like, I'll be like texting going, I'm on live right now. And she's like, oh, guess, I'm like, could you at least watch?
I love it.
But but yes, I mean, and I try really hard not to embarrass them. So hopefully she just heard that one. But look, your kids are a lot younger. It's your job to embarrass them, FYI.
Yeah,
So
right.
my kids are a lot older, so yeah, be sure to do that. The one thing I do love, and we connected right away on this, is I feel everybody has a story to tell. As a publicist, it is my favorite. It is the job that I enjoy so much, is telling my client's story. It's why I started this platform. I started it at the beginning of the pandemic to share small businesses stories, restaurants, and I had that fear too, like who would come on and talk to me. It wasn't really about sharing my own client stories. It was about finding people like you. So I was like, oh my God, who's going to come on? And the first 2 months, it was solid every single day. I was like, oh my God, I have a new job,
Yeah.
and but it was also so exciting because there were so many great people and so many great stories. selfishly, I couldn't believe what I was hearing and the people. And so I got to imagine like your heart gets so full when you hear these stories. I mean, do you have a favorite or?
It's
It's hard to
exactly
have a
that. Like
favorite.
there's like I honestly don't have the words to describe how I feel after these conversations that I have with these humans. And um because it's so magical to me
Mhm.
that people are willing to open up and go really deep and be
Yeah.
vulnerable in a world where we reward wearing your mask, and in a world where
Mhm.
I'm 36 years old. Like, I spent 34 years of my life like with a very thick wall that I built up, right? And so to think that in 2 years, like, this is my life. It got to a point where I ultimately decided to leave Google in the beginning of January because I was getting so much energy and passion from having these conversations. And I
Yeah.
was like, what better time to take a leap in the middle of a global pandemic,
It
but
is.
really lean into what makes me happy. And, um, you know, to answer your question, what is my favorite story? It's so hard to choose
I
one.
know.
I think that,
It's like picking your favorite
yeah,
child.
it's just,
I mean, I will
you
say that
can't.
because I will only share with you. One day I love, my husband will come home and it's just the two of us, and I'll say, how was your day? And I do these at 10 o'clock in the morning. So when he comes home at 7 o'clock, I don't remember how my day was, right? And but he'll come home and I'll say, oh, I interviewed so and so, and they created this, or this is their story. And then, oh my God, and I'm like, it was like the best interview I ever had. And then he'll come home the next day and I'm like, do you remember the interview I told you about? You won't believe what happened today. And
I love it.
so it's amazing. Like, you think like it doesn't get better and better, and it just gets better and better some weeks. And these amazing people out there and things that they've um, created or discovered or just endured. I mean, just the human endurance of their life. I mean, I also think, wow, I'm very blessed. You know, just some days having the boring little life in West Bloomfield, Michigan. I'm like, knock on wood, like I'll take it. I mean, I feel very blessed to just say, okay, boring life, good, I'm good, check. You have a really exciting new adventure coming up, and for sure when it starts, I want you to come back and you really talk in the moment of it. But tell me what's happening. I love these master classes. I got to jump on
Yeah.
a few of them. They're everywhere. So you have a master class coming, and let's talk about that.
Yes. Well, thank you. I have a masterclass coming. I'm timing it with the 1 year anniversary of the podcast, and it's storytelling for brands. And I've spent the last year talking to so many entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, or small and medium business owners. And so many people tell me, like, I have stories, but I don't know what to do with them. I don't know how
Mm-hmm.
to tie them into anything. And so the masterclass is all about how to develop and hone your stories, how to like lean into being an engaging storyteller, and ultimately increase your ability to engage and inspire your target audience. Because at the end of the day, and we talked about this
Mm-hmm.
before we hit record or go live, people buy from people. They buy
Oh,
from that connection.
yes.
And that is so important. And I think in a world of social media and, again, I was part of the problem in the last 13 and a half years at Google, being in sales and marketing. You're bombarded with ads day in and day out.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that. And so to cut through that clutter, it's all about that connection and that engagement. And so I'm launching a class starting April 1st. It'll be a quarterly membership The first, it'll be held on Fridays, and the first Friday of the month will always be a master class where I will be teaching frameworks. I will be pulling in people from my network, so storytellers, brand experts, brand
I love
practitioners.
it.
And then the second, third, and fourth Friday of the month is all about implementation and accountability, because that's the second part of what I heard from business
Mm-hmm.
owners is like, oh, we know this is important, but I don't have time. And so we're going to create that time. And so it'll be about content, accountability, and then connection and community. And
And follow up.
exactly, exactly.
Because one of the things I find in NPR and marketing is sometimes I help my clients with the tools and send them on their way, but, and give them a task, let's say, I have to follow up to check their follow up.
Exactly.
It's on me to follow up for sure, but they have to want it, they have to do it, and they have to follow up. And sometimes that, any part of that connection that doesn't happen, doesn't help grow your brand. um,
Exactly.
and accountability is so huge. I often kind of laugh when you're in February and you say, "What's your word of the year?" Because I feel as though 2020 was certainly pivot and adapt. And I got tired of it, but I do feel accountability is a big one in 2021.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's going to be a huge word in 2021, because that the businesses have grown, they've adapted and I don't use the new normal, because I have decided, and people have heard me say this, I don't I don't want to think of this as a new normal. I want to think of this as we're just going to be doing things differently. And so that's, where we are. But we have to be accountable to how we've changed things. And but I love this. Where will people go to find that master class, or how do they sign up when the time comes? And certainly send me the information, because I'll really want to share it. Amongst my clients who I know I get tired of. Maybe they need to hear it sometimes from other people.
Well,
It's like being a mom. It's like you
a
tell your kids
hundred percent.
something. It's like, wait, go listen to Jessi now.
It's so funny you say that, because I had somebody that I was working with, and she attended one of my workshops, and she was like, it's so funny. She's like, I knew this, like I've heard this before. She's like, but I
Yeah.
had to hear it from you in order for it to click. And I was like,
Oh,
yeah, I get it. Like I've been there.
well, I tell people all the time that I, listen to podcasts, or I listen to or read other marketing and PR things, because even though I know it, it's like that kick in the butt sometimes, or a refresher of the things you do know.
A
But
hundred percent.
somebody else, sometimes somebody else saying it to you differently, you
That's
know,
exactly it.
or like I say this all day long, and I'm like, maybe if I say it this way, because somebody else says it this way, maybe that will resonate more. But anyway, so where do people find?
Yes, you can find me on my website at www.jessishuraleff.com. And if you are interested in the masterclass, shoot me a direct message on Instagram. You can find me at This Is My Truth podcast. Um, I'm all about, messy imperfection. And so there's not a clean, lovely looking sales page yet on the website. So just reach out to me if it's of interest to you on Instagram, and we can get the
Perfect.
conversation started.
So most of that information is on the links that I put up today. I'm going to share this also on my personal page with the website. And I'm so happy that we had time together today. But definitely, I'll reach out to you and have you come back so we can talk about more about just the masterclass and everything going on.
Well, thank
So,
you. I
uh,
appreciate your time, and stay warm.
yeah, you too. Chicago, believe me, Chicago, the wind is probably whipping around.
It is something. Driving my oldest to preschool this morning was quite the journey.
Oh, I hear you. All right. Be well.
Thank you.
Take care.